Greetings, social commentators and political enthusiasts. Welcome to another episode of Celebrity Scoop. Today we're turning our discerning eye towards a recent royal announcement from Prince William, one that promises to tackle the pressing issue of homelessness and rough sleeping, but what might seem like a noble endeavour on the surface could potentially be hiding a more complex reality. So hang tight as we unravel this narrative and critically analyse its implications. Stay tuned as we delve into this pressing issue and critically analyse its implications. Recently, Prince William made a significant announcement ahead of his solo visit to Sheffield. The royal decree was filled with promises and grand gestures, a pledge of £2.4 billion towards tackling homelessness and rough sleeping between the years 2022 and 2025. But as we stand here, halfway through 2025, one can't help but question, what tangible change has this royal proclamation brought? The prince, donned in his pristine suit, took to the stage, expressing his concern, uttering the obligatory, "We must do more." Then, just as swiftly as he appeared, he faded back into the gilded halls of Kensington Palace. Yet, the crisis on our streets continues to rage on, seemingly untouched by this royal intervention. A whopping £2.4 billion, it sounds like a lot, doesn't it? But let's break it down. Sheffield City Council, for example, is set to receive just over £3 million. In the grand scheme of things, it's barely a dent in the issue at hand. And let's not forget, this isn't the prince's personal fortune being generously offered. It's public funds, cleverly repackaged under the glow of a royal headline. So where was this sense of urgency when the government first slashed funding for mental health, addiction services and social housing, the very services that prevent homelessness in the first place? Prince William, now seemingly stepping into the role of a saviour, may be too little, too late, and perhaps a bit too performative. Dressing up royal PR as impactful change doesn't necessarily make it so. Let's not be fooled into thinking that a choreographed hour in front of cameras equates to a real, lasting change in people's lives. If the prince truly cared about the plight of the homeless, he would be challenging the systems that perpetuate homelessness, not just papering over them with well-crafted press releases and palace-approved talking points. But halfway through 2025, what tangible change has this royal proclamation brought? The streets of Britain remain cold, crowded and forgotten. It seems that the royal announcement, rather than blazing a trail, is merely a distraction. Despite the royal fanfare, the reality on the streets remains grim. As we step away from the flashing cameras and the polished speeches, what we find is a stark contrast to the picture painted by these royal visits. The figures are not just numbers on a page, but real people, enduring a life that many of us cannot even begin to comprehend. The number of rough sleepers continues to climb, each individual a harsh reminder of a system that has failed to protect its most vulnerable. In a society that prides itself on progress and development, it's disheartening to see that we're still grappling with such a fundamental issue. But the problem doesn't stop there. Families forced out of their homes are languishing in temporary accommodations. These makeshift living conditions, meant to be a short-term solution, have become a long-term reality for many. And what about the children? Children who are supposed to be our future are growing up in emergency hostels. Their childhood, a time that should be filled with joy and wonder, is instead marked by uncertainty and instability. The royal visit, while it may shine a fleeting light on the issue, does little to address the root of the problem. The prince, in his clean suit, may speak of change and progress, but the reality remains unchanged. The crisis continues unabated. The lives of those affected remain untouched. Let's not let the glitz and glamour of royalty blind us to the harsh reality that exists behind the scenes. The funding that has been allocated, while it may seem substantial on paper, barely scratches the surface of the problem. And what's worse, it's not even the prince's personal contribution, but public funds, cleverly repackaged under the guise of royal patronage. So, we must ask ourselves, is this royal visit just another distraction from the real failure? Is it just another attempt to pacify the public, to divert attention from a crisis that continues to grow under our very noses? Sheffield City Council is set to receive just over £3 million, a mere drop in the ocean. This sum, while not insignificant, barely scratches the surface of the problem at hand. The question is not whether the funds are welcome, they certainly are, but whether this gesture is as impactful as it is made out to be. Let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. We're talking about a crisis that has been escalating for years, a crisis that is deeply rooted in systemic issues such as the lack of affordable housing, inadequate mental health services, and insufficient support for those struggling with addiction. Yet when these crucial services were in dire need of funding, where was the urgency? It was conspicuously absent. Cuts were made, services were shuttered, and the consequences are now plain for all to see. Now, in the middle of 2025, we're expected to celebrate an allocation of funds that, while substantial on paper, will likely fall short of making a significant dent in the problem. The harsh reality is that the number of people sleeping rough continues to rise. Families are stuck in a cycle of temporary accommodation, and children are growing up in emergency hostels. While the funds are being allocated, the core issues remain unaddressed. The spotlight is on a royal visit, a well-timed photo op, rather than on the systemic changes needed to truly combat homelessness. It's not enough to throw money at a problem and hope it goes away. It's not enough to make grand announcements without addressing the root causes. It's not enough to play the role of the saviour without challenging the systems that perpetuate the problem in the first place. Can we really call this leadership, or just royal PR dressed up as impact? This isn't about pointing fingers or making scapegoats. It's about asking the hard questions, demanding accountability, and insisting on real, tangible action, not just photo ops and press releases. It's about recognizing that true leadership involves more than just allocating funds. It requires vision, courage, and a commitment to making a meaningful difference. It's time we stop equating camera time with real change. Let's peel away the veneer of royal appearances, the glint of staged photographs, the echo of well-rehearsed speeches. Let's delve deeper, beyond the surface of these grand announcements, and ask the real questions. Are these actions truly transformative? Or are they simply a well-crafted illusion, a mirage of change that fades when the cameras stop rolling? We must challenge the narrative that these royal visits and billion-pound announcements equate to real, lasting change. Because the truth is, they don't. Addressing homelessness and its root causes requires more than just a fleeting visit or a headline-grabbing funding allocation. It requires a commitment to systemic change, to tackling the deep-rooted social inequities that drive families into temporary accommodation and individuals onto the streets. It demands a relentless quest for justice, for fairness, for a society where everyone has a safe place to call home. So let's stop applauding the empty gestures. Let's stop celebrating the pomp and ceremony. Instead, let's scrutinize the actions, the policies, the real difference made to the lives of those most vulnerable among us. Where is the funding for mental health services that can prevent homelessness? Where is the investment in addiction support in social housing? Why are we not addressing the systemic failures that led to this crisis in the first place? The answers to these questions are the measure of real change. The answers to these questions are what we should be demanding, not the spectacle of a royal visit or the promise of funds that may never reach those who need them most. It's time for real action, for policies that prioritize people over headlines, for a commitment to change that extends beyond the reach of a camera lens. It's time to challenge the status quo and demand more from those in positions of influence and power. This isn't action, it's distraction. The streets of Britain remain cold, crowded, and forgotten. Despite the royal fanfare and public relations spins, the harsh realities of homelessness persist. The government's allocation of billions to address the issue is commendable, yet the results are far from satisfactory. It is halfway through 2025, and the situation remains grim. The number of rough sleepers is still on the rise, families languish in temporary accommodation, and children grow up in emergency hostels. These are not just numbers or statistics, but real people, real lives, caught in a cycle of despair. A royal visit, a clean suit, a few well-intentioned words, they do not change this reality. The real challenge lies not in allocating funds or making public appearances, but in addressing the root causes of homelessness. The slashing of funding for mental health, addiction services and social housing, the very services that prevent homelessness in the first place, needs to be questioned. The world watches as a prince steps into the role of a saviour, but this is not about individual heroics, it is about systemic change. It is about holding those in power accountable. It is about demanding more than just a photo op. It's high time we stop equating visibility with impact. Let's demand action, not distraction. The streets of Britain deserve more than just royal headlines. They deserve real change. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Celebrity Scoop. Stay informed and keep the conversation